Right, today I've got the task of connecting up the exhaust manifold on Phil's V10 E46 to the Eisenman back box. So I'm just going to go through how I'm going to do it, some tips and tricks I can show you along the way, and just kind of, an opportunity to show off this amazing manifold while I'm doing it. One thing I will say is, because I posted a picture of this manifold on the internet and I've seen it on Phil's posts as well, always get comments, people saying, oh, it's going to be hot, it's going to ruin the coil packs, it's going to do this, it's going to do that, it's not best performance. Like, the whole idea of doing this is not for the every last horsepower you can get out of the engine. Sometimes it's just cool to do things because you can and for fun and because nobody else has done it. So don't leave comments that are like, you know, this isn't going to be best for performance or whatever, or it's going to wreck the engine bay, or it's going to ruin the coil packs or whatever. Just appreciate the work and the skill that's gone into this, and not necessarily think about how it's going to lose 5 horsepower because, you know, all of the length in the primaries. Right, so I've Scotch-Brighted all that up and then cleaned it with isopropanol, cleaned the inside a little bit, because obviously I'm going to try and weld this. It's in quite an awkward position, and as always, like, the prep is the most important part, but even more so in an area where you can't really get to it to weld very well. Like, I always say, like, the most important part of welding is being comfortable. So if you can't be comfortable in the position you're going to weld, you need to make sure that everything else is literally bang on. Right, so I've got that pushed on there. It's actually a pretty good fit, which is good, because I can't swage it out and make it any tighter because it's already on the car. And like I say, what I'm going to do is I'm going to push a purge plug in there, and to make it easier for me to weld in some respects, I'm going to take a bend, I'm going to clean it up first, tack that to the other side of the V-band, clamp it all on in the easiest position, so probably going to be pointing down. Then I'm going to put my other purge plug in here. That way I can purge the manifold, I can weld this back end up like that as I can get to, and I've not got to worry about, you know, a purge plug or any kind of heat sink or anything being really close to where I'm trying to weld, which I wouldn't normally mind if I was on the bench, but because I'm trying to do it on the car, I need as much space as I can get. So that's the way I'm going to do it. Yeah, so what I'll do is now, I'll get the ends of that brushed up, place that flexi over there where I want it, mark it, because obviously I'm going to put it on here at a slight angle, so it's pointed right exactly where I want it to go, tack it on, and then think about how I'm going to get over this header primary, engine mount, steering column conundrum, because 3.5 inch does fit through there, but only just, so I think we might have to, you know, come up with a bit of an engineering solution for that in terms of maybe creating a fixed section on the engine block, but we'll get to that in a minute. Like I say, I'll get this, get the ends of this brushed up, get it marked, get it tacked, and then we're ready to go. Got this engine mount, exhaust header, steering column conundrum. We'll probably be able to show it better when it's done, which is probably not the way you want to watch it, but it's just the way it's going to be. Yeah, don't come out that hole. Comes out that hole. I'm literally just going to cut this in half, so it's 45s, and then what it'll allow me to do is allow me to straight line 200mm up to there, and then I can actually rotate it around, and then where I've cut it in the middle, I'll be able to rotate it back to where I want to go. All the while keeping the same internal diameter, so everything is correct, rather than like cutting a cross bend, which you quite often see. So yeah, I'm going to cut this at 45, I'll cut this basically in half, so it's 45s, and then yeah, 200mm long piece, and hopefully I've got a feeling that's going to work. Again, sometimes you just get a bit of an idea, you can kind of see it before you make it, and I've done a lot of these kinds of things, so hopefully I can just straight line that, 45, bring it back out, away from the engine block again, back out towards the gearbox. Right, so I've got that 200mm long piece with the 45 on the end, I've got the other 45, and I can more or less straight line that through there. It's not perfect, but it's pretty good, you know, trying not to be a perfectionist and spend all day making sure it's absolutely bang on. It'll still be close enough. I'm not saying it's not going to be bang on for people thinking I'm cutting corners. I'm not. It's very close to being perfectly straight out of the flexi. I'm sure Phil will be happy to grind a little bit of this modified chassis leg just to gain a little bit of extra clearance, and that's what I'm kind of assuming. So then what we're going to need is we're going to need a straight piece around the steering column here. So I'll guess that's about 4" long, so 100mm-ish through there. So I'll cut a piece for that. I'll tape that on the end of here, try that. If it looks good, then what I'm going to do is I'm going to prep up these pieces and tack it together. So once that's tacked up and I'm happy with it, I'll actually weld that, because every time you weld, there will be a small amount of movement compared to where it's tacked at. And given some of the tolerances are quite tight, we don't want to go too far on just tacks, because then when you weld it all up, it moves and it no longer fits. So I'll cut that 100mm piece, try it in. If it looks good, we'll tack it all together, try it back on the car, weld it. Hopefully it's all still good, and then we can carry on down the rest of the tunnel. That's the other thing we've got to consider, is can we get it in and out with a V-band on the end of there? Maybe is the answer. Maybe. Right, so I've just shortened that 100mm. Right, so I've just shortened that 100mm long piece. I was like, I'm going to say mil, and then I couldn't keep a straight face. What's that thing that Ron Burgundy says?
We're on in 5, 4.
Right, so I've just shortened that piece down now. And right, I've just shortened that piece down, and I've got the other 45. And I know I said I was going to weld it at this point, but what I'm going to do is just cut a piece that I know is going to be too long. So I'm going to cut it, I don't know, let's say 300mm, maybe a little bit longer. No, let's say 300mm, just to check that I'm heading in the right direction with this, because what I don't want to do is wish that I'd change the angle slightly before I weld it up. So I'll just get a 300mm long piece, tape it on, and then I can just try it up, and if it looks good, then I'll go and weld that front section. Yeah, that's looking spot on. We're clearing the old lower arm mount, or wishbone mount, what you want to call it. It probably will want like a little bit of angle taking off, but I can do that after. It maybe only just wants a couple of degrees taking off it, just to bring it away a little bit more. But yeah, we're going in the right line. So what I'm going to do is I'll take this front pipe off now, get it cleaned up, get it welded. The only question mark we've got is, where do I put the next join in here, and how are we going to plan on getting this in and out? Realistically, it's got to go out the front way, and then it's how long can we make this, and where do we put the join in it so that you can actually get it out, because it is quite tight getting it through. I'm not sure if we're going to actually have enough room to have a V-bend on the end there. Right, so I've got that piece in that I've just welded, and that's the other 45-degree bend with the 300mm straight on it, which fits in there, lovely, lovely jubbly. The only, and that's like the complicated bit done. if I was to just put that on there. The only issue is I need a join somewhere, and a V-band flange is obviously quite a bit wider than the tube. So it's about half an inch to 3/4 of an inch, or 13 to 19 mil for those metric people, wider than the tube is. And I think we're getting to the limit of what I can actually get out of that gap. So what I need to try and do first is, I think, tape this to the end of the bit I've welded, then tape a flange to the end of the bend and see if I can get it in and out of the gap. If I get it in and out of the gap, fantastic. I'll put the flange on the end there, and then we can continue the exhaust down, and that is the most complicated part sorted. So yeah, that's what I'll do now. I'm going to get this on the end of there, get a flange on the end of that bend without the straight on it, and see if we can actually get it out the front. Right, we're past the engine mount. Right, so second attempt with the steering column UJ, unbolted and out of the way, and it goes in. So that's exactly what we want. Yes, it's not ideal to have to unbolt the steering column from the rack every time you want to take your downpipe out, but I think there's going to be some compromises with this car, so that is a minor compromise, I'd say. So yeah, that goes in there. Lovely jubbly. Yeah, then it's just a case of we'll have that piece of tube with that other flange on the end of it, and yeah, then we will continue the exhaust down from there. So that's the next bit, is welding that flange and that bend on the end of the front pipe, and then that's it all sorted. Right, so that all looks really good, and I've figured out where we can get a bracket on, which should work out really nice. There's two holes in the back end of the engine block, which basically are perfectly above where this primary piece comes down on the back of the bulkhead. So I'm just going to work out now where I want to cut the exhaust in terms of having enough room to get another flexi in. Then I'll cut it, we'll work out that bracket, and then flexi straight down the back of the exhaust. So I've managed to get that bolted back in now with the bracket welded on, and it all still lines up. Now when you weld those kinds of brackets, they can move around a bit, and maybe it has moved a little bit, but it still clamps up to the V-band. We've still got good clearance around that steering column UJ. We've still got clearance on the engine mount, and we've still got clearance on the header primary above it. So it's all looking good. Whether it'll be the same once it's got some heat in it, and it's being driven hard, because obviously Phil does tend to drive his cars quite hard, which means generally lots of engine movement, and we've done the best job we can. So we'll have to wait and see. I've got another flexi on here, so that was my plan. Once I got this mounted solid with that bracket, I now need another flexi to carry the movement of the exhaust system. So we've got that flexi at the front, which is going to carry the movement of the manifold and the engine, and then this one is going to carry the movement of the kind of exhaust system. So I've got another bend cut and a piece which is going to drop into that flexi here. But our next challenge is that 3.5 inch tube is actually too big of a diameter and hangs below the chassis rails. And one of the things Phil said was he doesn't want it to hang below the chassis rails. Ground clearance, obviously the car's really low. So we have got to either oval this tube out or use oval tube. So that really is our next challenge, is can we oval this tube out with the equipment I've got? And if we can't, we need to get some oval tube so we can carry on the rest of this exhaust. Because like I say, it needs to be ovaled quite a lot. We really don't have the room here. And then we've got to bend it around into the center of the car, and then we've got to get through where the standard twin exhausts go, and also 3.5 inch doesn't fit through there either. So again, we've got to oval some more tube out. But we've done the most complicated part now, in that we've got from that manifold over and around the engine mount, and we're now at the back of the engine at the gearbox, and the rest of this should be simple now. Right, so while we're waiting for that oval tube to turn up, I'm going to get cracking on this back box. And the plan is actually, this has already been cut open in the past, so I'm going to try and make good of what's been cut and kind of MIG welded. But primarily the goal is to remove these two 2.5 inch inlets and change it to one 3.5 inch inlet. So that's going to involve, I'd say, cutting this open, cutting these off, plating over it, and changing how it's routed inside. I don't know what's inside until we get it open, but yeah, hopefully it's not too bad of a job. There's a fucking wasp in there. Look, out this way. You can see where out is. So it's probably very deaf. Right, so got all this cut open now. Had a bit of a think about it, and I've decided I can't really be bothered, to be honest. So I'm just going to weld it all back together and tell him it's done. No, what I'm going to do is we're going to strip all this out. I didn't know what to expect inside here. There's many different ways that different manufacturers create these kinds of back boxes. They're not often as simple as you think they are, and then until you get it open you just don't know. But this one's relatively simple in that it's basically two pipes into a central chamber, and then from that central chamber it's two pipes either side into two separate chambers into the tailpipes. So it's relatively simple, but we need to change this from two 2.5 inch tubes as to one 3.5 inch tube. So my plan will be to cut these off, which is what we were going to do anyway, and then we're going to remove these two perforated tubes that go into this central chamber here, and then I'm going to make a merge piece, which will go something like that in the middle, and I've got these two mandrel bent perforated pieces which will go something like that into that central chamber, and then merge that into 3.5 inch, and then a 3.5 inch bend out into the outside world. Right, so that's that all welded up. Got the centres on here about perfect for the centres on that baffle. Unfortunately, those holes are a bit too small for this to slot through. It must have been slightly smaller perforated tube that they had used. It doesn't matter, they don't need to push through there. It just would have made my life a little bit easier. But basically what I'm going to do now is I'm going to get some Acoustofill to go between here and wrap this up so that it's not actually touching on this stainless part. Then I'm going to fit it in where it wants to go, line it up nicely, weld it from this side so that it's fixed, pack the rest of it with Acoustofill, and then it's going to be a case of trying to weld all this back up. Right, so managed to get this all welded back up. It's been a bit of a challenge, to be honest. Not that it was a bigger job than I thought it was going to be. I did know that it might turn into quite a big job, but more or less this has taken about 6 hours, 6-7 hours, I'd say. And really, the perfectionist in me would still like to spend probably another hour and a half finishing all these welds off, even though they're never going to be seen. And from the underneath, it does look quite neat. And you know, at some point, it'd be nice to maybe just get a polishing wheel under there and get it all polished up, just so that it kind of looks as factory as possible. Because like I say, from the underside, when it's on the car, I don't think it'll be that immediately obvious that it's been changed. So that's what I wanted to try and achieve, and that's what we've got. But yeah, time to throw it back on the car now and work out that centre section. Hi there. Right, so we've got the silencer on now and it looks good. I mean, from the underneath, I think by the time it's got a bit weathered, like the rest of the exhaust, I don't think you'd tell it's been modified. So that's exactly what I wanted to try and achieve. So it's taken me all day, but you know, that's how it goes. So what we've got now is we've got a point at the front to work at and a point at the back, or front and back. It's just a case of connecting those up now, apart from with oval tube in the center section, which we'll show in a minute, and then we've got to get a valve in. And the idea behind the valve, that's going to sit somewhere there, is that with the valve closed, the exhaust is just going straight through this back box as normal. With the valve open, the gases have like a secondary option, which will be through basically just a straight pipe, which is going to land exactly in between and underneath the tailpipes on this side. So there's a little bit of work involved in that, well, quite a bit, but I think the best course of action at the minute is to get started with this oval tube and get ourselves to this kind of drive shaft area, and then we're probably looking at another joint in the exhaust here, and that's where we'll put the valve in. Right, so I've just managed to, you could buy the transitions that were like 50 odd quid, or you can just try and make your own. I didn't know how it would go because stainless is quite difficult to manipulate. I'm in the trade of that, and it is, you know, it's a bit of a twat. But I managed to just squash it in the vise, to squash it into like a square shape, and then swage it, and it's brought it out pretty much round, which is perfect. That's all we need. I've had to stretch it, but it has brought it out round, so that's good enough for me. So yeah, in this position here, like we've actually got the ground clearance is limited by the chassis, not the exhaust, which is what we want. Now, we might not get that here, but we'll just do our best to try and keep it as tight up to the body of the car as possible. But yeah, what I'm going to do now is I'll tack this bend to the piece of tube that we did before to the flexi, which leaves all that in a fixed position, and get that all prepped up. And then using one of the bends, I'll work out how much I need to trim this back. Yeah, tack it on, because again, I cannot change the orientation of these bends. It's not like working with round bends, where if you need to like bring the end of it up or something, you can just rotate it. You can't do that with these. You're fixed in that one plane. So the only way I'm going to be able to rotate that is on this joint here. So I've got to get that perfect. And then yeah, try and work out how to get the orientation of those two 45-degree bends through this piece of exhaust tunnel here and then out the other side. Right, so I've got this kind of mocked up now, and the floor stays pretty flat, all this kind of main chassis rail, which is what I'm trying to keep the tube above. The whole idea of going for this oval tube is that we end up with the car, or this piece here, as the lowest point on the car, not the exhaust. But in the center of the car, around the transmission tunnel, it kind of comes back down again. So I've got to keep the bend as far forward as possible so that it can go as high as possible. I've still got the issue of this second bend is on a different plane height-wise to this first bend. Now the best way of solving that with this oval tube is I'm going to basically cut a slight angle on one end and a slight angle on the other, and then I'm going to put a piece in the middle which has got a slight angle on both ends, and that's just going to bring that up like a few degrees, which is all we need over that, say, 200mm distance. Just bring it up with a slight, it's basically pie cutting, but with such a small angle that you'd never really notice it. That's all tacked together, and I've got that about as good as I think it's going to go. We've got all the clearance we need, which is the beauty of the oval tube. We've got a perfect gap, top and bottom. It fits really well, to be honest. Even with the oval tube, I didn't think it was going to come out as well as this, but yeah, it's looking really good. So all I'm going to do now is work out the oval to round section for here, tack that on, and then we'll get all this section welded up. Showtime. Okay, so now that we've got this oval section done, there's a short piece here where we needed to put that center silencer, and what I've actually managed to do is get like a 5x10, which is quite small really, especially considering it's a 3.5-inch bore. Really, we're using the space we've got, and it's not a lot. I mean, as you can see further down the exhaust, we've had to use oval tube in order to like get the ground clearance, but I've got that silencer in there with another V-band on the end. So what that's then created is that kind of from that second flexi all the way to here, that's one solid section. There's no need to put extra joints in it unless you need to. So I've kind of gone for doing it that way, because when you're fabricating it on the car, it doesn't really matter too much, if you only have a few joints in it, because it's not like I'm going to be posting this exhaust out. It's going to live on this car forever, and it's only going to suit this car. Yeah, the next joint comes just before the diff. And I'm now working out this section up towards the valve. Right, so the plan is now I've got this section in here which just takes it past the diff. That's just an easy bit. It's just two bends basically. Two bends, two bits of straight. And now we're clear of the drive shaft, the bottom arm, the anti-roll bar, and all that stuff. So that's like all of the suspension out the way really. It's easy from now, kinda, other than this is the critical bit, because we've got to connect it up to it's obviously got to land exactly where that V-band is that we fitted on the back box, and we've got to get the valve portion bang on out under the tailpipes. So what I'm planning on doing is making a Y piece like this, and I'm going to install that something like this. Probably with the valve the other way around. Yeah, the valve will go like this. I'm thinking in real time. So the valve will go like that, and then that'll shoot off towards the back box. So I'm going to get these bits tacked together, and I think really, again, you can only really aim to do one at a time. I can make it easier for myself but with a bit of forward thinking in terms of I've got kind of 2 exits that I need to get right. It's obviously got to hit that V-band, and it's also got to hit bang on in the middle between the 2 tailpipes at the back. So yeah, I'm gonna kind of play around with it and probably get it something like that. It's actually not going to be far off there really, because it gives me plenty of room to put that valve in, and then plenty of room to kind of redirect it and get them exactly where they need to be. I'm probably not doing a very good job of explaining this. I'll do a better job of explaining it when I've done it. Right, so I've got that bit finished off now, which is basically just another 2 straights with some bends in it to connect that section next to the diff with the silencer in it up to the rear back box that we've obviously already modified. But the next bit, which is I guess the tricky bit, is getting this valve in. So my plan is, well, what Phil wants is like a bit of a downturn, which is going to sit just there, just kind of under the tips. And then I've like cut a merge, something like that. And that is going to go on kind of in between that weld joint, you can just see. And then with the kind of tip on it, that allows it to finish just in front of the back box. So that's going to work out pretty perfect really. So yeah, got that marked. Just a case of getting that welded on there now. So got that pipe refitted now with the merge welded into it, but this valve, it's like a touch too big, so it's making it quite hard to line it up nicely on that piece of pipe. In terms of like when I've got the pipe pushed into it, I can't see if it's like square on or not. So I'm just going to mark around the tube with an old set of verniers, like an offset line, so I can line it up with that offset line, and then I'll know exactly, or a lot better than guessing, a valve is actually square on the tube, and I'll do the same on here as well. And then it's just a case of welding this valve up. Hopefully that was entertaining. I've had a lot of fun working on this. I wanted to be involved in this project since really it's been on the internet. You know, the opportunity to finish off this beautiful Celeritech manifold with some of my own fabrication, using some of my own products, you know, it's fun. Hopefully I've done it justice. If you've got any questions on any of the things I've done, or maybe you want me to do it in a bit more detail in separate videos, let me know, because I would enjoy to do those kinds of videos, but only really if people are going to watch them or it actually helps people. But yeah, if you head to the Driftworks channel, I'm pretty sure you'll be able to see this car running soon and you'll get to hear the exhaust. But yeah, thanks for watching.